My phone buzzed at 3:07 p.m. I remember the exact time because I was staring right at it, waiting on a loan approval email that was going to save my company $40 million. Instead, I got the hospital. "Mrs. Atkinson, your husband's been in an accident. You need to come now." I didn't even grab my purse right, left half of it hanging out of my bag. Keys jammed the ignition twice before I got the car started. Houston traffic on 610 doesn't care that your husband might be dying. I drove like it did. Here's the thing about me. I'm Lydia Atkinson, 35, Chief Risk Officer of a freight logistics company me and my husband built out of a 2-desk office 10 years ago. My whole job is spotting problems before they blow up, reading people, reading numbers, catching the lie before it becomes a disaster. I could not read my own marriage. Funny how that works. I ran into that ICU waiting room soaked in fear sweat, ready to fall apart. I told the nurse, "Samuel Atkinson, I'm his wife," and she looked at me like I'd just said something that didn't compute. "Ma'am, his partner already signed him in. She's back there with their son." Partner? Son. I don't have a son. I've been married to Samuel 8 years. No kids. We talked about it, put it off for when things settle down. Things never settle down. I didn't scream. I didn't argue with the nurse. Something colder took over. The same instinct that's caught 9-figure fraud before it hit a balance sheet. I walked down that hallway slow, quiet, and I looked through the little glass window of 412. There he was, bandaged up, hooked to a monitor, alive. And there she was, Rose, his executive assistant. 3 years I signed off on her paycheck. She was gripping his hand, crying actual tears, and next to her stood a little boy, maybe 4 years old, with Samuel's exact jaw, saying one word on repeat: "Daddy." And then, this is the part that really did it, my mother-in-law was standing there too, rubbing Rose's back like she was comforting her own daughter. My father-in-law had his hand on the boy's shoulder, comfortable, practiced, like they'd done this 100 times. They looked at Rose the way they never once looked at me in 8 years of Thanksgiving dinners. This wasn't a fling. You don't get grandparent-level comfort from a fling. This was a whole other life, running parallel to mine for years. I backed away from that window before anyone saw me, didn't say a word. My hands weren't even shaking. That's the scary part. I felt myself go flat, go calm, go dangerous. Out in the hallway, a nurse was talking to a doctor near the desk. I caught it without even trying. The domestic partner already filled out his intake. She had his social, his insurance ID, his medical proxy code. Medical proxy code. Samuel told me he lost it 2 years ago, said we'd get around to resetting it. She had it the whole time. I turned to leave, and that's when I saw his briefcase sitting on a plastic chair outside the room, cracked open from the crash, lock busted from the airbag. A manila envelope was sticking half out the top. County Recorder's Office, Property Division. You don't carry property transfer paperwork around on a random Tuesday, not unless you're rushing to lock something down before I could stop you. I took a picture of that envelope with my phone, didn't touch it, didn't open the door, didn't scream his name. I turned around, walked to the elevator, and watched the doors close on the sound of that little boy calling my husband Daddy. By the time I hit the parking garage, I wasn't a scared wife anymore. I was Chief Risk Officer looking at the biggest fraud case of my career, and it had my name written all over the collateral damage. I got in my car, locked the doors, and just sat there in the Texas heat, dead silent, staring at my own hands. Then I picked up my phone and called the one guy I trust with real dirty work, a forensic investigator I use when the company gets hit with something ugly. He answered on the second ring. "Please tell me this isn't about the supply chain leak again." "No," I said. "I need you to pull everything you can on a woman named Rose and a kid and whatever's tied to a shell company I don't have a name for yet." There was a pause. "What am I looking at here, Lydia?" I looked back through the parking garage glass toward the hospital doors. "I don't know yet," I said, "but I'm about to find out exactly how long my husband has been playing me for a fool." What I didn't know, sitting in that garage, was that the envelope in that briefcase wasn't the beginning of his lie. It was the last piece of a 5-year plan to take everything I own and hand it to a woman I used to trust with his calendar. If you're watching this, drop where you're tuning in from in the comments. Hit subscribe if you want the rest of this story, because what next is where I find out exactly how deep this goes. And trust me, it gets worse before it gets better. I didn't go home that night. Not really. My body drove there, but my head stayed back in that hospital hallway, replaying Daddy over and over like a song stuck on repeat. Our house sat out in the suburbs west of Houston, big enough to need a map, quiet enough to feel like a mausoleum. I walked past the kitchen, past the wine I didn't pour, and went straight into my home office, locked the door. Not that anyone was there to walk in. Here's something people don't get about betrayal when you're wired like me. I don't cry first. I calculate first. Cry later, maybe never. My hands went straight to the keyboard. Years back, Samuel and I shared an old cloud account just to sync calendars. He moved to some fancy corporate server eventually, but he never wiped the old sync off our home network. Lazy man. Lazy men leave doors open. Took me 40 minutes to get into his calendar history, and there it was, a perfectly organized map of his double life, color-coded like he was proud of it. 1:15 p.m., recorder's office. 2:30 p.m., Capital Trust Partners. I knew that name. Capital Trust doesn't do normal loans. They do fast, ugly, high-interest money for people who can't get approved the regular way, the kind of lender who doesn't ask where your collateral came from. My phone buzzed. 9 o'clock. It was Declan, my investigator. "I got a first pass," he said. "Your husband's assistant doesn't live on a secretary's salary. She's got a place in the Heights, paid in full 2 years ago, $2.4 million. Whose name's on the deed?" "An LLC. Buried under 3 layers of paperwork. Took me a while to even find a pulse on it. But Lydia, that's not the worst part." I sat up straighter. "Go on." "There's a kid enrolled at a private school off Memorial Drive, 36 grand a year. Guardian and billing contact listed." He paused just enough to make my stomach drop before he said it. Samuel, 3 years. He'd been paying tuition, health insurance, the whole setup for 3 years, while coming home every night complaining about the stress of the board and drinking my good scotch. I pulled up the company's fleet tracking system next, something I'd insisted we install myself for insurance purposes, ironic as hell now. I looked at Samuel's location data from that afternoon. He left the office at 12:45, didn't head toward a highway home, didn't head toward a client lunch. He went straight downtown, doing 80 in a 55 zone, weaving through traffic like a man running from something. He crashed at exactly 1 p.m. He wasn't late for a meeting. He was rushing to file paperwork before somebody caught him, before I caught him. I sat back and looked at the calendar entry again. Capital Trust Partners, 2:30 p.m. A high-interest lender needs collateral, real, hard, provable collateral. What does a man with a maxed-out shadow life put up as collateral when he's already bled the company dry? My phone buzzed again near midnight. Declan's voice this time was different, not casual anymore. "I traced where the LLC gets its money," he said. "Where? It's coming out of your own company, Lydia, disguised as consulting invoices. 3 payments a month, every month, each one just under 50 grand, $1 under the threshold that would trigger a board review." I didn't say anything for a second. The air conditioning kicked on somewhere in the house, and it was the loudest thing I'd heard all night. This wasn't cheating anymore. Cheating is ugly, but it's human. This was embezzlement. Calculated, timed, dressed up in spreadsheets to look invisible. He wasn't just lying to me in the bedroom. He was stealing from the company we built together, funneling it into a house, a school, a whole second family, and hoping I'd never look close enough at the books to notice. He thought I only read corporate ledgers.
He forgot I built the risk department that catches exactly this kind of thing for a living. I opened a blank spreadsheet and started building the case the way I'd build a fraud file against a stranger, except this stranger slept next to me for 8 years. Around 1 a.m., I remembered the manila envelope from the briefcase, County Records Office, Property Division. I hadn't even gotten to that piece yet. I pulled the photo up on my screen, zoomed into the return address, and that's when something cold and sharp cut straight through me. It wasn't our house listed on that filing. It was my grandmother's lake property out in the hill country, the one place in this world that was mine before I ever met Samuel Atkinson. 4 generations in my family, never his to touch. I sat there staring at that address for a long time, feeling the exact moment my sadness turned into something else entirely. Because if he was trying to file paperwork on land that belonged to me, land I never signed away, then somewhere out there was a signature, and it sure as hell wasn't going to be mine.
2 days later, I walked back into that hospital room wearing a cream blouse ironed stiff enough to hide a body behind. Full mask on. Wife of the year. Samuel was awake, neck brace on, a row of stitches tracking up his temple like a bad zipper. The second he saw me, his whole face did this thing, relief and fear fighting for space. "Lydia," he rasped, "I need to explain." Of course he did. Men like Samuel always got the story loaded before they even opened their eyes. Rose was following me when the accident happened. Her nephew was in the car. Kid got scared, she brought him up here. That's it, that's all it was. Nephew. I almost laughed. I didn't. "Of course," I said, soft as anything, sitting right on the edge of his bed like a good wife should. His mother, sitting stiff in the corner chair, hands folded like she was in church, jumped in to help. "Yes, well, Eli's such a sweet boy. We've known them a while now. He was so excited about that new bike he got for his birthday out at the lake house." Silence. Dead, heavy silence. We spent last Labor Day in Chicago, company conference. No lake house, no bike, no Eli. I watched her face go white as she realized what she'd just handed me. Samuel jumped in fast. "Mom means before. She's confused. It's, my head's killing me right now, Lydia. Can we not do this?" "Of course," I said, smiling, patting his hand. "Let's focus on what matters. The board's going to want a statement. Can I use your phone? Let them know you're stable?" He nodded, grateful for the exit ramp, and gestured toward his belongings bag. His thumbprint wouldn't register through the medical tape, so he punched in his passcode by hand. 081420. August 14th, 2020. Later, I'd confirm that's the exact date Eli's kindergarten enrollment got signed. Men give themselves away in the dumbest ways. While sending the board update, I scanned his home screen, a folder labeled Utilities tucked in the corner, 3 finance apps hiding inside it. I memorized the icons and put the phone back exactly where I found it. "Where'd they tow the car?" I asked, casual as small talk. "Impound lot on Washington, total loss." Digging through the belongings bag for his wallet, my fingers hit something small and hard at the bottom, the dashcam memory card. Paramedics pull those out before a wrecked luxury car sits in an impound lot overnight. Standard procedure, and lucky for me. I slid it into my pocket like I was looking for chapstick. "And your briefcase?" I asked, casually. "Saw it in the hallway, locks busted." He tensed up so fast the monitor beeped. "Nurses put it in the closet, just vendor contracts. I'll take it home so housekeeping doesn't touch it." I walked to that closet myself, popped the broken clasp, and there it was, the manila envelope, right on top, like it was waiting for me. I slid it open just enough to read the header. Quitclaim deed, my grandmother's property,
and at the bottom, in blue ink, a signature that was supposed to be mine. I never signed that. I've never even seen that document before in my life. "Just vendor stuff," I said, sliding it back exactly how I found it. "I'll drop it at the house." I kissed his forehead, cold and clammy. "Get some rest, baby." I made it to my car before my hands finally shook. I plugged that dashcam card right into my laptop right there in the parking lot, found the file time-stamped 3 minutes before the crash, pressed play. Samuel's voice, annoyed, rushed. "I'm going as fast as I can, Rose. The traffic's a mess." Her voice, sharp, nothing like the crying woman in the hospital room. "You need to file that deed today. The lender needs a clean file by morning. If Lydia sees the bank notice before we close this—" "She's not seeing anything," Samuel snapped. "She's buried in meetings all week. She only looks at the company books, not the house mail." "She's not stupid, Samuel." And then the sentence that's going to sit with me till the day I die. "Let her try," he laughed. Actually laughed. "She doesn't own me. She's just the bank with legs. She funds the lifestyle, I run the real world." Then tires screaming, metal folding, glass everywhere. Then nothing. I sat in that parking lot a long time, didn't cry, didn't scream, just closed the laptop slow, like shutting a door on something I couldn't let back in. The bank with legs. That's what 8 years bought me. I drove home that night and didn't sleep. Instead, I called a lawyer. Not a nice one, a shark, the kind divorce attorneys in Houston whisper about when they lose to her. I laid the whole file on her desk the next morning. "Prepare everything," I told her, "but nothing gets filed until I say go." Then I called a second firm, completely separate, completely private, dealing strictly in corporate fraud. I split my war into 2 fronts on purpose. Family court couldn't slow down the company case, and the company case couldn't leak into family court. By the end of that week, I'd locked him out of every joint account without him noticing a thing, moved liquid cash into something only I controlled, called the trustee on my grandmother's estate, and put a triple signature lock on anything tied to that land. Nobody touching it without 3 separate approvals now, including outside auditors Samuel could never buy off. Then I did the one thing that really mattered. I called the chairman of the audit committee myself. "I'm formally flagging irregular vendor activity," I told him, voice flat, professional, giving away nothing personal. "I need an independent internal audit, quiet but immediate." I didn't mention Rose, didn't mention the kid, just enough truth to light a fire that the board would have to put out themselves. That night, back at the house, I was reviewing files at the kitchen island when my phone buzzed with a notification from the tracking software Declan had quietly installed on Samuel's synced devices. A text thread. Rose to Samuel. "Once the funding closes and everything's secure, we need to talk exit strategy. You promised she'd be off the board and out of the house by end of year." I stared at that message a long time. Off the board, out of the house. They weren't just hiding a second family anymore. They had a whole plan to erase me completely, and it was already moving faster than I thought.
Labor Day weekend. Samuel's idea, not mine. He wanted a family cookout at our house, his parents, and somehow, unbelievably, Rose too. Said it was time everyone got comfortable with the new structure of things. The new structure, like I was a department getting restructured out of a job. I said yes, smiled, told him I'd handle the food. A butcher doesn't panic when the pigs walk into the pen on their own. But before we get to that backyard, let me back up 3 days, because that's when I set the real trap, the one that mattered. I'd been letting Samuel think I was cooperating, playing exhausted, playing practical. One night, I sat across from him in the living room, sighing over some compliance report, and mentioned, real casual, that private lenders were getting strict these days. They want clean paperwork, I said. No married executives acting as sole guarantor on outside companies. Too much risk of asset disputes. They'll kill a deal over it now. Total lie. I made it up on the spot. But Samuel's whole body went still, because Samuel was mid-deal, trying to close that shady loan through his shell company, and Samuel was still legally married to me. "Since when's that the rule?" he asked, trying to sound calm. "Since this quarter," I said. "Lenders want an independent managing signer, someone with zero ties to the marriage." Took less than 12 hours for that seed to grow exactly how I planted it. My monitoring caught the whole conversation, Samuel telling Rose he couldn't be the signer anymore without risking exposure, and Rose, greedy and blind, jumped at it herself. "Make me the signer," she said in a voicemail I saved word for word. "It gives me real authority, Samuel. It keeps Lydia out of it completely." She thought she was getting crowned queen. She had no idea I was the one building her throne out of 100 pounds of legal liability with her name stamped on every page. By the following Wednesday, the paperwork was ready. I'd built it myself with my white-collar attorneys. Buried deep in the legal language were personal indemnity clauses, sworn statements about the lawful origin of funds, and a liability trigger that meant whoever signed as managing director was personally on the hook for every dirty dollar in that company. Samuel signed first, confident, relieved. Then Rose picked up the pen, gave me this little smirk like she'd already won, and signed her name with a flourish. She thought she was taking my place. She'd just taken the fall for both of them. Which brings us back to the cookout. Labor Day. Backyard smoking with brisket, string lights, my in-laws holding court like they were hosting royalty in my own house. Rose showed up in a silk top, a delicate gold necklace hanging at her collarbone, a teardrop stone. I recognized instantly. My anniversary gift, the one Samuel told me he'd lost on a business trip 2 years back. She was wearing my stolen jewelry at my own cookout. I took her plate, refilled her drink, smiled the whole polite, hollow smile. "Gorgeous necklace, Rose," I said. "Vintage cut. Suits you." "Thanks," she said, touching it. "Samuel's got great taste." "He really does," I agreed, and walked off before my face gave anything away. The conversation at that table got loose fast, the way it does when people think they've already won. My mother-in-law started talking about getting Eli into the right elementary school early. Private, expensive, exactly the kind of school where the Atkinson name would matter. "He's the future of this family," she said, looking dead at me while she said it. I poured her more sweet tea and asked, real light, "Who handles his pediatrician appointments? That paperwork's always such a headache." She didn't even pause. "Oh, Samuel's been on top of that since he was a toddler. Upgraded his insurance himself when he had that bad case of pneumonia." My father-in-law chimed in laughing about some family trip to Colorado last winter, paid for, he mentioned, using company travel points. A direct violation of corporate policy, and he said it proud as anything, like it was a fun fact. Samuel's fork hit his plate. He knew exactly what his dad just admitted to. What none of them realized, and I mean none of them, is that the smart speakers sitting on my kitchen counter, on the porch, by the grill, weren't playing music. They were recording every single word, straight to a private server, my server. That whole backyard turned into a confession booth, and they walked into it themselves. Rose, feeling bold off 2 mimosas, leaned back and looked at me with this little smug tilt of her head. "So, Lydia,"
Samuel mentioned you two are finalizing things soon. Have you thought about when you're moving out? This house is way too big for one person. The whole table went quiet. Even his mother looked uncomfortable. I set the pitcher down slow, looked Rose dead in the eye. I'll start looking at new arrangements, I said, right after the board finishes voting. Rose blinked, confused. She didn't understand what that meant. Samuel did. His face went gray in front of everyone. That night, after they'd all left and the house went quiet, Samuel came into my office holding a folder, called it a settlement proposal. I opened it. It offered me the old condo I owned before we got married, my current SUV, and a small cash payout. In exchange, I'd sign an NDA, give up my shares in the company, and disappear. He wanted to erase me for pennies. I looked up at him, kept my face soft and tired. I understand, Samuel. Let's finalize everything Friday, main office, noon. His shoulders dropped with relief. He actually smiled. Friday, he said. I'll have legal draw up the final papers. He walked out of that office thinking Friday was the day he'd finally get rid of his wife. He had no idea Friday was the day I'd already scheduled the audit committee meeting, the asset freeze, and the delivery of every piece of evidence straight to his lender's compliance department. He thought he was walking into a room to sign a divorce. I was walking in to watch his entire world catch fire.
Friday, noon, downtown Houston. Top floor conference room, glass walls, the whole board watching. Samuel walked in wearing a suit sharp enough to hide a limp and a neck brace, cane tapping the marble like a countdown. He thought he was walking into a divorce signing. He had no idea what time it actually was. At 9:30 that morning, he'd signed the final lender certification for his loan, swearing under penalty of perjury that the company had no hidden conflicts, no forged collateral, nothing dirty on the books. Perjury. Documented. Time-stamped. At 11:45, Rose strutted around the office handing out business cards that said Managing Director like she'd been crowned. She had no clue those cards were a signed confession. At noon, I walked into that boardroom without a pen. Lydia, Samuel said, catching himself, sliding the settlement papers toward me. Let's make this painless. I'm not signing anything, I said. I just came to talk. At 12:15, my lawyer filed the emergency restraining order downtown. Judge signed it in under a minute. Every account tied to his shell company, frozen. My grandmother's land, locked. At 12:20, my legal team sent the entire evidence file straight to his lender's compliance office. The forged signatures, the dashcam audio, the fake power of attorney, everything. Samuel's phone buzzed on the table, then his lawyer's phone, then the boardroom line lit up red. He read the message, and I watched the color drain right out of his face. They're calling the loan, his lawyer said, standing up, actually stepping away from him like he was contagious. Notice of default, fraud. They want you personally liable. Before Samuel could even speak, the doors opened. The audit chairman walked in with 2 forensic accountants, face like a closed casket. You're suspended effective now, he said. Don't touch a company server. Samuel looked around that room, his lawyer backing off, the chairman done with him, and finally, me. I didn't gloat, didn't smile, I just let him look. At 4 p.m., full board meeting. Samuel tried the sympathy card first, called it a personal matter, said I was a jealous wife exaggerating things. A few old-timers on the board actually nodded along. I didn't argue. I just plugged in my tablet. Timeline, dates, signatures, the $12 million credit line approved from a Chicago hotel while I was in another country, the forged deed on my family's land, the insurance beneficiary switched without my knowledge. Then I played the audio. His voice from the crash recording filled that glass room. She doesn't own me. She's just the bank with legs. Nobody breathed.
The chairman stood up. Internal audit confirms it. 3 years of ghost vendor payments funneling straight into a shell company. This isn't a marriage problem. This is grand larceny. Right then, security walked Rose in. She took one look at the room and broke completely. "I didn't know," she screamed at Samuel. "You told me the title was just paperwork." "Shut up, Rose," he snapped. "You made me sign it," she shot back, crying now, mascara everywhere. The chairman had her removed. Then legal dropped the last bomb. The lender wanted Samuel held criminally liable for the false certification he'd signed that morning. Samuel played his last card. "You're destroying a family. That money was for my son." "Glad you brought him up," I said. I pulled up the final slide. A filed court petition, stamped that morning. "I've already set up an independent trust for Eli, his school, his insurance, his future, completely separated from your debt. He's protected. You don't get to use him as a shield anymore." The board voted him out in under 2 minutes. Terminated for cause. No severance, no golden parachute, straight referral to federal investigators. 30 days later, deposition room, no cameras, just me, my lawyer, and a stenographer typing every word Samuel screamed about a hostile takeover and a jealous wife. We didn't argue back. We just laid out the paper. His parents, cracked in family court under oath, admitted they'd known about Eli for 3 years, hosted him for holidays, hid the whole thing to protect Samuel's access to my money. And Rose, realizing Samuel planned to let her take the fall alone, pulled a backup phone out of an evidence bag at her own deposition. Thousands of texts, Samuel telling her exactly how to strip my shares, exactly how to push me out. She traded his destruction for her own deal. The board voted for cause. Criminal referral went federal. The judge froze every asset tied to Juniper, the loft, the car, the jewelry, including my stolen anniversary sapphire. Rose lost everything. Samuel lost more. The company, the title, the reputation, all of it in front of everyone who used to respect him. I held one line through all of it. Eli didn't do anything wrong. His tuition, his insurance, his future, none of it touched the wreckage. He kept his school, he kept his doctor, he kept his life. I ruined the people who betrayed me. I didn't touch the one person who never had a choice in any of it. 6 months later, I sold the house. It was never a home, just a really expensive place to keep secrets. I left the logistics industry behind, took what I'd rebuilt, and opened my own firm, helping other women spot exactly what I missed: forged signatures, hidden accounts, fraud dressed up as love. I didn't win because he lost everything. I won the day I stopped being the bank for a man who was never actually mine.